to introduce him. I knew David for about 10 years. Since the first time he got elected to be the supervisor in San Francisco. And the first day on his job, he got selected as the chairman of the board. This is uneasy because the district he represents includes the eastern San Francisco, and that encompasses San Francisco Chinatown, Financial District, Fisherman's Wharf, and North Beach. So his campaign is always very difficult, but he did it, and we are so proud of him. I think a lot of people knew him already. I really don't need to introduce him much, but I still want to say something maybe you never heard of. David was born in Cleveland, Ohio, but then moved to Boston, Massachusetts, when he was young. So he went through education actually in Massachusetts. He went to get 3 degrees from Harvard University. The first one was in government from Harvard College. The second degree was a master's degree in public policy from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. And finally, he got a law degree, the Juris Doctor degree from Harvard Law School. So this is a very unusual accomplishment already. But then the story went on. Before he got elected to the public office, he served as the criminal prosecutor and the civil rights attorney before he went to campaign for the public office. So in 2008, he was first time elected to be on the board of supervisors in San Francisco. Then the first day on his job, he got elected to be the president of the board. Then, you know that in California we'll have term limit. So after his term limit, so he can only serve for 3 terms. Then he moved on to be elected to be the assembly member in the California state. And just want to let you know, he is not only the first Taiwanese American to represent the eastern San Francisco. He is also the first Asian Americans. That's a larger population, the first Asian American to represent that district. So anyway, that's so far. Then after 6 years, he moved on to the state assembly member, where he is serving as the chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee. In 4 years, he authored 48 bills to be signed by our governor and put it into the California law. Not just that he authored the bill, but also got approved and signed by our governor. So isn't this such? And these bills will impact the housing, the transportation, the civil rights, health care, education, and environment. So isn't it quite an accomplishment in just 4 years? And last year, in November election, he got, I remember, probably 75% or more votes from his district to be re-elected the 3rd time. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to pass the microphone to David. And today he's going to talk about our community, our Taiwanese community's place in America. 伊要甲咱讲，咱台湾人的社区伫美国的角色甲地位，所以咱用上大的掌声来个欢迎戴立Chiu。
大家好，新年恭喜，新年快乐 ，Happy New Year. I am so honored to be with the leadership of the Bay Area Taiwanese American community. I want to thank Pam for that very warm introduction. I've been in office now for 10 years, and my aide Kenneth reminds me that I get invited to about 70 Lunar New Year events every year. That's a lot of Chinese food. But it is important every year when I can to come and join all of you, because I am the son of Taiwanese immigrants. I want to start by introducing someone who, in addition to my wife, has been the most important person in my life. Mom, do you mind standing up and saying hello? On behalf of my family, we want to thank all of you for your friendship, for your support, and for being such a wonderful community. So I was asked to speak for a few minutes about our Taiwanese community's role in our country, our role in politics. Why does it matter for us to get involved? And what the future holds. To answer that, I want to start by sharing a little bit about my personal journey, because I stand here as a son of Taiwanese immigrants and currently serve as a legislator in California for the 5th largest economy in the world. And I was never supposed to be here. I was never supposed to become a politician. I come from a family of doctors and teachers. My father's father, my grandfather, sold herbs in Pingtung. He raised my son, who was one of 7, who went to Kaohsiung Medical College, served in the Army, and then decided to immigrate to the United States, like all of us and all of you, looking for better opportunity, which is where he met my mother. My mother comes from a family of educators. My mother's father, my grandfather on the paternal side, was a principal in an elementary school in Tainan, which is where he met my grandmother, who was a teacher. My mother went to Taiwan Normal University, and she immigrated here to get a graduate degree in statistics, and then helped to raise her 3 sometimes unruly children. Because of them, we are who we are. I'm often asked, why is it that your Chinese is so terrible? And I have to explain. When I was 2, as you just heard, my family, we moved to Boston, Massachusetts. And for some of you who may remember, in the 1970s, Boston, our entire country, were the scenes of very intense racial conflict. It was during the desegregation era, when courts had ordered African American students to be bused to white schools. There were race riots. It was tense. And my parents spoke to my brothers and I only in English to make sure that we fit in, to not be singled out for speaking Chinese or having an accent. And I will tell you today, as a parent of a 2-year-old, it is so incredibly fortunate that we live in a time when my son Lucas can learn Chinese in a Chinese nursery school, that we live in a society and a time when diversity and tolerance is cherished. Now, my mother will tell you, I was never supposed to grow up to be a politician. That was the last thing they ever wanted of me. My parents wanted me to be what every Taiwanese parent wants their kid to be, which is a doctor. This is why my mom made sure that my brothers and I studied. And when I was growing up, I did study the math and sciences. I took all my pre-med courses. I first declared my major at Harvard to be biochemistry. But let me tell you what happened. Something happened my freshman year in college. There was an incident that happened at a nearby university where there were 8 college students, including a Taiwanese American student, who were going to a formal dance. And in the dark of night, they were attacked by some of their fellow college students who spat on them, who called them names, who harassed them for 3 hours. A few days after that incident, these students went to the university administrators and said, "You need to bring justice." Those university students, those university administrators, because the student attackers were college football students, did nothing. So those 8 college students asked Asian American students in the area to come and protest. And I got a call. That was an incident that changed everything for me. I started studying the civil rights movement, the history of what happened to our various Asian American communities through the course of American history. I decided to go to law school. It was the call that brought me to California, a state that better tolerates diversity and tolerance. It is why I became a civil rights attorney. It's why I became a criminal prosecutor. Now fast forward to my late 30s. There was a seat that opened up on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors representing the Northeast neighborhoods. What was interesting was this seat includes the oldest Chinatown in the United States, San Francisco's Chinatown, which for the over 160-year history of San Francisco had never been represented by someone who looks like us. I called my parents. I said, "I'm thinking of running for office." They were wondering why I was thinking about doing that. I remember my father telling me that they hoped I spent a little more time thinking about getting married and having children. And I explained to them that in Chinatown, the oldest Chinatown in the United States, there were hundreds of Chinatown restaurant workers, half of whom made less than a minimum wage, half of whom had suffered burn injuries. 97% did not get health insurance from their employers. And I also explained that in Chinatown and in the surrounding neighborhoods, you had thousands of Chinese families living in poverty, living 3, 4, 5 people to a room, 8 by 10 feet. And we had hundreds of Chinese seniors living in buildings that were susceptible to earthquake and to fire. And so I ran for office. Now, it was a very intense campaign, and some would say an ugly campaign. And let me explain why. I had 9 people in this race, including 6 non-Chinese opponents, who said to the community, "Well, he's too Chinese to represent the rest of us." There were some supporters of my Chinese opponents who said, "Well, that guy doesn't speak Chinese, so he won't be able to represent the Chinese constituents." Despite that, I was elected with the support of San Francisco voters, with the support of our Chinese voters, and with the support of many of you, and for that I will be always grateful. Now, over the last 10 years that I've served in office, I'm often asked, does my heritage, my immigrant background matter? And very simply, I will tell you that it does, in so many respects. Ways that you would expect and ways that you would not. So for example, let's talk about the topic of acupuncture. I didn't know, and many of you probably would not know, that when the Great Recession hit us 10 plus years ago, the state of California stopped reimbursing acupuncturists in providing health care. And what did that mean? That meant that so many of us who rely on acupuncture would not have access to acupuncture. This was brought to my attention, and working with my great Asian legislative colleagues in the legislature, today, acupuncture is a covered benefit under California healthcare programs. Let me bring up another topic, the topic of bullying. A few years ago, it was brought to my attention by a Taiwanese parent who I'm very close to, that his son had been bullied in the classroom, that his teachers had not seen what was happening to him in the classroom. And so I did some research. It turns out in recent years, the number of immigrant students who are bullied in the classroom has been going up. And so we proposed a law to address bullying in the classroom, to require teachers to be educated in identifying bullying. And 4 weeks ago, on January 1st, that law is now the law of California. Education, a topic that everyone in this room cares about. I now serve as the chair of the Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus. We have 16 members. We are the highest numbers we've ever been. I know that my wonderful colleague, Chiu, who is the second member of the Chiu caucus in the California State Legislature, he was here earlier. For us, the number one value, the number one priority is education, because we know this is how we get ahead. And we all know that all of us who are legislators, we wouldn't be where we are without the education that we receive. We also know that in California, our schools have not received the funding that they have. So we have prioritized year after year, increasing by billions of dollars what is going into every educational institution in the state of California. Representation matters. Now, despite my unlikely path into politics and a few thoughts on why it matters, let me just share a few thoughts on where I think our community is going. In part, we live in uncertain times. There's uncertainty about our economy. There's uncertainty about the world order. There's uncertainty about how we will address the challenges of the day, from climate change to inequality, to the housing crisis, to the congestion on the streets of the Bay Area. And we're living in a time of United States history when our immigrants are being scapegoated yet again. My parents immigrated to the United States from Taiwan in the 1960s, which I suspect is a time period when many of you immigrated to the United States. You may remember that during that time, our country's leadership thought that it was a benefit to America for immigrants to bring their talent, their genius, their entrepreneurial drive to make America better. We are not in one of those time periods right now. I often think when I'm on the floor of the California State Legislature that this was the legislature that in the 19th century passed our country's first anti-Chinese exclusion laws. This is why in recent years, working with my Asian American legislative colleagues, we have passed laws to protect immigrants from being bullied, to protect immigrant workers from being subjected to illegal searches and seizures by government agents, to protect immigrant students who are being educated in the classroom, to fight for immigrant scientists and researchers that need to get H-1Bs to be able to invent the next greatest invention in the world here in Silicon Valley. We're even having a national debate about whether someone who is born to an immigrant, myself, your children, your grandchildren, should be able to be citizens in the United States. Let me say that again. We're having a debate about whether those of us who are born here can be citizens. You may think, how can we even have that discussion? Because over 100 years ago, there was a Chinese American in San Francisco who sued on this very issue, brought a case to the United States Supreme Court His name was Wong Kim Ark. And he established, through his successful case, the constitutional principle that if you are a son, a daughter, or grandson or granddaughter of immigrants, if you are born here, by definition, you are a United States citizen. Unfortunately, we have a president at this day who is challenging that right, that birthright to citizenship. We live in uncertain times. Globally, we're also living in times when democracy is being threatened. Whether it's a United States president who doesn't always follow the facts, or strongmen presidents in other countries who rule as autocrats, or places where citizens don't enjoy full civil rights, democracy is under threat. And this is why it's important that our community stand together for itself and that we fight for our rights. Now, I'd like to end on a more positive note. When I was 6, my parents brought me to visit some Taiwanese friends, the Yangs. And I became friends with the son of the family. His name is Jeff, who was around my age. Over the years, we talked often about the Taiwanese community, about our Asian American community, perceived for so many decades as outsiders, not accepted in our society, in politics, in how the media portrays us. A few years ago, Jeff's 11-year-old son, Hudson Yang, became the lead star of Fresh Off the Boat, the first sitcom in 20 years to depict an Asian American family. To me, this is a sign of how far our community has come, how far we have traveled to finally be accepted. As someone who is second generation, I want to thank all of you who immigrated from Taiwan, who sacrificed, who paved the way for those of us who are 2G. Because of you, our second generation has been able to succeed, to find our place at the table, to finally, with you, arrive here in America. But it is also because of you that our 3G, our third generation, my son Lucas, Jeff Yang's son Hudson, your grandchildren, your children, will be able to thrive and succeed in ways that we could only dream of. That's because of all of you. That's because of the work we do together. I just want to say, on behalf of your political leadership, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And with that, I look forward to many years of working with you. I look forward to many more banquets like this, celebrating our Lunar New Year. And I want to wish each and every one of you good health and good fortune in this new year. Have a wonderful afternoon.
有问题要甲问无？两个三个 questions， 较紧举手，有无？无，恁大家拢 OK， 拜托来，麦克风。
And if you could introduce yourself, your name, maybe what city you're from?
Oh, I'm Steve Wu. I'm a resident of Cupertino. So there's a question for David. In light of our president talking about revoke the birth citizenship, I think that is not in action yet, but the potential can be. So I want to know what state of California is doing to prevent that happen, and what do you view the likelihood that that may happen? Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. It's a great question, and I will just repeat it if you didn't hear it. President Trump has proposed revoking birthright citizenship. What are we doing in California about it, and what is the likelihood of it happening? I'll answer the question around likelihood, which is, as I think everyone knows, a few months ago in November, there was a change in Democratic Party control in the Congressional House. And that's important in part to provide some checks and balances to the decisions that are made in Washington, D.C. Because under Donald Trump, he has made it an important aspect of his leadership to attack immigrant communities and to put out this idea. And there are many people, not all, but many people in his party who agree with him. And so the fact that there is balanced government now a bit more in Washington, I think makes it a little more likely that this will not happen. But the very fact that the President of the United States feels comfortable in suggesting that every person in this room, everyone in this room, myself included, could lose their citizenship and be deported, is a suggestion of how far he has gone and how much support there is for an anti-immigrant sentiment. So in California, this is why many of us from immigrant backgrounds have been speaking up often. You probably have read about it in World Journal and Tsingtao. When I say we cannot allow this to happen, we all have a rightful place here in the United States. Many of you who immigrated here as first generation, you were invited to the United States to be scientists and doctors and professors and business people that have helped America succeed, and we have to make sure that all of us continue to have a rightful place here in our country.
Yes. Continue to be active.
Sure.
What your assessment of the Asians' future in California?
Absolutely. So it's a great question. The question is, give us an update on John Chung. I think it was last year I came to this very Lunar New Year event 2 years ago with John Chung when he was running for governor. You know, listen, John, we are also proud of how far John was able to go. He started, son of Taiwanese immigrants, working for elected officials, won his first office, won his second office, was one of the very top office holders in the state of California. And when he ran for governor, he was really the first major Asian American candidate to run for that position. John is doing well. He's been offered numerous positions at law firms, on corporate boards, in academia. I do believe that we are going to hear more from John into the future. But you know, what I'll tell you is the future, I think, is bright for those of us who are of Asian and Asian American descent here in our state of California. As I mentioned before, we have a record number of API legislators, both Republican and Democrat, representing every facet of the diversity of our Asian American community. But just as importantly, we also have local elected officials, and I see the mayor of Fremont who's here, I see others. We have hundreds of Asian American local officials who are coming up through the ranks, so that at some point when I am term limited out, because of term limits, I have potentially 8 more years in the legislature, I'm hopeful that we will have others who will step in behind us, who will continue to build a pipeline and continue to represent. This is what the American political system is about. But really, for the first time, you're seeing in the last 5 to 10 years an increase like we've not seen before. Maybe one final question?
One more question?
Hi, my name is Sarah. My question is about the birthright. So I need a clarification when you say that President Trump is revoking the birthright of the immigrant, right? So is it for illegal immigrant or is it for legal immigrant?
Legal, not just legal immigrants, citizens. Me. I was born here in the United States. Donald Trump has suggested that those of us who may be considered citizens today, but we were born to immigrants, that our citizenship could potentially be revoked.
So
I'm not talking about undocumented illegal immigrants, I'm talking about children.
Legal immigrants.
Legal immigrants.
Okay.
And in particular, he has suggested that Asians immigrate to the United States and have their children here so that they become citizens. He has specifically said he wants to stop that. And again, that would impact virtually everybody in this room. So with that, I want to just thank you. I'm sorry I have to go back to San Francisco to attend other Lunar New Year events. But it's great to see you. Happy Lunar New Year.
感谢，讲了好听吼，我要拍较大声一点。要感谢咱那个Keynote Speaker所有的会长，展览会要送伊一个小礼物。